takes a lot of water for these guys. It's a whole bucket of water.
Your seatbelt on.
Yeah, okay. We had a little chip on our windshield, Nick, and they fixed it, but I can still see it right here in front. She don't like me to look around, though. She said she'd go to Cheyenne with me if I promised not to look around.
Oh, nice of her.
Yeah, she did. You got that little sign there. Good morning. How old are you now?
85.
I'm 88. So see there, if you just mark, these minors got to behave.
Hey, you want a good picture? I ask the women how old they think I am.
Yeah.
From 70 to 65.
I suppose.
And then I slip them $1.
He hates evil, but Satan sees everything through his evil heart. And Satan says, does Job serve you for nothing? Haven't you been giving him all kinds of cookies, all kinds of blessings? The only reason Job serves you is because you bless him. Remove the blessings, and Job will curse you to your face.
Lord willing, we live till 1st January of your 70s. Yeah. I have a lot of
We could
fun.
ruin the whole thing if we died.
How old were you when you got married? They said.
Well, the main thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about is your earliest memories of getting to know each other. That's something that, Nate, you're rolling, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. And you can just keep it rolling the whole time. That's something that, like, you know, I've heard bits and pieces of that story, but I don't really know that much about it. So tell me, we talked about it a little bit in the car the other day. Tell me about your earliest memory. Start with the story about them forcing you guys in the back seat together.
Yeah.
You can tell that one.
Yeah, it was rather interesting the way my brother and her brother cooked it up, because they, of course, were sitting in the front seat, and there was two of us, and of course we had to sit in the back seat. Laura would sit clear over on the right side, I would sit clear on the left side. But they got a big kick out of that, you know, because we were both just a little timid, and because that's the first time I'd met her. And we got along pretty good, though, but it's interesting, as we went to different meetings later on, we kind of got better acquainted, you know.
Sat closer together.
Yeah.
No.
On purpose this time?
Yeah, on purpose. That would be the 8th grade, and you were in the 8th grade at Kyle.
And I had to walk back and forth to school, and he rode the bus. And so as I was walking, I'd try to get home before that bus came by, because all
holler at
these
her,
guys
you know.
were hollering out the window.
Oh, yeah.
Just harassing.
It was
was
so
so fun.
embarrassing. Okay, my full name is Laura May Heinrich Edwards, and my husband's name is Albert E. Edwards. We were married January 1st, 1950, and so we're going to soon be married 70 years. Okay, my earliest memory is a long time ago. As a little girl, my older siblings were married. You know, my memories of that, they were already married. There were 3 brothers and a sister, and maybe a little bit older sister still at home. Mabel and Harold and Bob and Sam and Clara. And I remember that Mabel sometimes curled my hair, and I thought that was really special, because it wasn't like curling hair now, believe me. We didn't have much in the way of toys, very little. We had to make our own entertainment. And at the time, Shirley Temple was popular. And so she had these cute long curls and just a little doll. And so we would put these clip clothespins in our hair and pretend that we were Shirley Temple. We started working in the fields as soon as we got a little bit older. Thinning beets behind my dad, and I had to do it just right, or he'd come back and show me the right way. And then as we got older and did more of that with our brothers, we might as well plan to be thrown in the ditch at the end of each row, because that's what they did. was different growing up with immigrant parents because they did not see the importance of education like people in this country born here do. They had to work so hard to do anything they did that they thought that was the most important thing in the world, was to teach us a good work ethic. And so we learned that, like it or not. On Saturday was the day to go to the grocery store. And Gritzfeld's had a grocery store on Main Street, and I remember the men went to the pool hall, and the ladies, after they bought their groceries, would stand on the corner with their little babushkas on their head and talking in German. And I was very shy at that time. I'd stand behind my mom and I'd think, oh, why don't they talk in English? I remember they would say, oh, she is so skinny. I don't think she's going to make it, stuff like that. And when my mom would say, the Lord knows, she'd say, Lord knows. And I thought she said, Laura knows. And I thought, how am I supposed to know that? We were treated differently some of the time. We were called Russians, and we were called Nazis during the war. And there was some racial stuff then, discrimination. But for the most part, there were a lot of them that came and settled in this valley. And so many of them, the kids excelled in school. I remember one year, Sam, Clara, and I all went to the district spelling contest and won. As the older ones worked so hard, I didn't have to work as long as they did, but they missed so much school that by the time they got to high school, it just was a struggle. So they didn't pursue it. And as shy as I had been as a little girl, I was just that determined that I was going to finish high school. And so I think I gave my parents a little trouble from time to time. We did have a big family. There were 11 children, 6 girls and 5 boys. And my parents had lost another child when she was 4 with pneumonia. And I don't think my mother ever really got over that. I loved books. From the time I was a little kid, I absolutely loved books. We had a big old kitchen range that we heated with and cooked with. And so if I possibly could, I'd get behind that stove and with my books so I wouldn't be disturbed. And it was not an easy life, but I wouldn't trade places with anyone today. And even though my parents weren't outwardly affectionate very much, my sisters teased me about my mom rocking me till I was 12, which she didn't do. But I knew they loved me and they always provided for me. But they just, their values were teach these kids to work and they'll be okay. 2 of my brothers went to the military in the Second World War. And I remember that was really hard on my parents, and we missed them too. But I had to write letters for my mom because she could not write in English. My dad could at that time, but my mom couldn't. We were so thrilled when I was in junior high and we moved into a home that had indoor plumbing. And it was about 2 years after we moved there that my brother Sam had polio. And so we were quarantined at that time. That was embarrassing for me for some reason to be quarantined. Shouldn't have been, because a lot of people went through that. But it was a really hard experience seeing what Sam went through. I remember if we got one Christmas gift, we were thrilled. And we usually got some little thing. And then our church always had big bags of candy and oranges and apples, and that was a highlight. But it was a lot different. But they were good days. And that reminds me too, when my parents were going to citizenship school, I was probably maybe 10 years old maybe. And we had a terrible car accident. And my dad it was a cold, snowy night, and we kids, Sam, Clara, and I were going to go to the movie while they went to their schooling. And the car stalled out in the middle of the highway. And he kept honking the horn, but this guy kept coming and rammed right into my dad's side of the car. So the car was on its top and my dad was under the car. And at that time, again, you didn't call an ambulance, people came along and helped. And enough people finally came that they were able to get him out from under the car. But then put him in a car, drove us all to the hospital, and he had a skull fracture, and he was very, very bad. But it was at that point that his life changed. He had drank occasionally, and as I said before, I didn't like him much when he drank. And that ended. He started going to their brotherhood meetings at church, and we started praying at mealtime. I don't think he really abused any of us. I felt like he was verbally abusive to my mom when he was like that, and threatening and jealous, and just a whole different person when he drank. And so I was really, really happy when he stopped doing that. But I do remember being fearful at times growing up, not because of what he might do to me, but what he might do to my mom. I remember that. That was hard. As he got older too, he was much more loving, and especially after my mom died, that hit him so hard. He felt a lot of guilt, even though the latter years had been better. He felt guilt over the way he had treated her early on, and but he was. I remember when he was dying of cancer and sitting and holding his hand and talking to him. And I just wish I'd asked him a lot more questions about where they came from and what life was like there. But at the time, it didn't seem important. It does now.
That's funny. And so that was 8th grade.
Yeah.
And then when you moved into high school, were you in the same high school?
Yeah, we were in the same high school,
Okay.
same class in the 9th grade.
He kind of sat behind me in every class
Yeah,
if he could.
just about.
Except
Were
when we
you
had a
dating at
fight.
this point?
We started dating, I guess, didn't we?
Freshman.
Yeah.
Freshman year?
Well, we couldn't date much because
We-
my parents wouldn't let me date much. But
Yeah.
we'd
It ended up, though, that we finally were able to date.
go to
and
school functions.
drove a-
and,
See, that was a freshman year, and I don't think I was driving then, was I?
no,
so-
we all went in your parents' car, all 8 of us or whatever it was. There was one car for everybody. So,
But anyway, the sophomore year, I went to Huntley High School. As we drove to Huntley, Bob would usually be driving, obviously. And,
like a maniac.
huh?
Like a maniac.
Oh, yeah. We'd come, there's a place called Rattlesnake Hill, isn't it? And it's straight west of Lyman. And when you come from Huntley, which is just straight west of Lyman, when you come back over to Rattlesnake Hill, there's a rut right down the middle of the road. Well, this steering wheel would turn about 1.5 before you ever caught. You know what I'm saying? Bob would bring us down. How we ever lived through it, I don't know. Because the Jack Zimmer and I would ride in the rumble seat. Bob Zimmer and my brother Bob would ride in the front. And I swear I don't know how we lived through that. But it was a
Did you
Model A Ford.
Did you drag Grandma into that?
Grandma got to ride in that Model A Ford the following year
Yeah.
because I'd take her on dates. Well, I'm Al, or Albert Edwards. I'm 88 years old, and Laura is my wife of going to be 70 years January 1st, and I'm very proud of that. Well, my dad was raised in near Oakdale, Nebraska, which is in the northeast part of the state. My mother was raised somewhere north of Morrill, and she had a sister, Pearl, and they had a beauty shop in Morrill for a number of years before they were married. Pearl and my mom were really close for many, many years, and it was always interesting. My folks were Democrats and they were Republicans, and there was always some kind of a squabble got into on holidays when we'd go there to visit. The things that were different as far as now is totally technology. You know, I mean, there was no. We had a radio if we had electricity. Like I said, we didn't have plumbing. We were outside toilets midwinter and summer, And we used oil lamps. I remember north of Morrill when we lived on what we called the Remender farm, and we had oil lamps with a wick that we used in the middle of the table. That's quite a bit different than what we do today. It was the progress was slow, you know, back in then. You didn't get rich quick on a farm, but my dad provided for us very well, even though it was rough at that time. Being a youngest in the family, I got picked on a lot. My early memories are of just farm work, and as it moved along, as we got into 4-H and things like that, it was a lot of fun. As we moved along, we played baseball together. My dad was a manager for some of that as we were young. And you know, that was the kind of thing that I admired about the family. We stuck together.
What did you want to be when you grew up? When you were a little kid, what was the thing that you envisioned?
That's a tough one. I had probably too many wild dreams of all kinds, I think. But I guess I had envisioned when I was a kid and got into baseball that I wanted to be a baseball player. I thought I was pretty good playing catcher, and I always felt that's where the activity was. That was some of the great times of that early life, was playing baseball with your brothers, you know, on the same team, and then maybe having some degree of success playing semi-pro and that sort of thing. It was great, but I did look kind of forward to maybe making it. We had an opportunity to go to Oklahoma. The manager was Vern Hoshite. Vern managed that team for a number of years, but he ended up as the pitching coach for the Oakland A's. In fact, I got to see him a number of years later. I got out to Boston, and he allowed me to go to a couple of games and give me tickets on the third baseline. And so I got to watch Catfish Hunter pitch. So I kept in touch with him for a while, but that was down in Oklahoma. I did hurt my arm, and I never threw a baseball for 2.5 years after that because I just kind of wrecked it. I just was not in condition that I should have been to compete down there. As a catcher, I've always looked at it as being all of it's in front of you, the batter and all the players, so you can see them all. But I felt that in that sense, it gives you some degree of control, you know, and I loved it.
When we see people now, they still remember what a good baseball player.
Oh.
They did. You were a good baseball player.
What is your earliest memory of knowing that you really liked music and that you wanted to play?
It's kind of funny. It goes way back, because on Saturday night when we go to town, all of us boys in the back and the mom and dad in the front. Now I'm talking about when we were smaller. It was amazing. I mean, we'd get to singing. But what was really funny, Buzz, my brother Buzz, Rolland, a lot of times he'd be sitting right here, and he couldn't carry a tune in the basket. And he felt so bad, but he really wanted to sing. We'd sing anyway, regardless of what it sounded like, you know. But my mother was always encouraged. Oh, she loved that when we'd all sing, you know, going to town. It didn't progress to the point where I thought I had some degree of talent until I got into high school. So every Saturday night we'd go to town. My mom would pick up another new sheet music that I could either sing or learn to play, you know. That's the way she would promote it for me. And I kept busy learning new songs about every week, you know. And that kind of went on for years. There's a family called the Flint brothers. They farmed just south of Lyman. And my brother Howard, of course, went to school there too, you know, and graduated. But he was good friends with them. They had a trumpet. And so Howard brought that home. I got tooting around on it and whatnot, and I was the only one ended up being interested. So it evolved to the point where I started playing for dances when I was a junior, I guess it was. Anyway, kept it up for several years, playing dance bands.
Back to our first date, your mom had to call my parents and assure them that she was going to be there every minute.
Oh, they were protective.
Let's see, we met when we were about 13 or 14, and shortly after that we were we were thinking the other one was pretty nice, but he got a lot of attention from a lot of girls, and I got a lot of attention from a lot of boys. And so sometimes that became a problem.
I have to think, back at that time, I didn't know the Lord as my personal Savior, but I think He had a hand in our connection.
We were both strong-willed, and so especially those first years, I mean, he was still smoking, and I was emptying the ashtrays as quick as he was putting the ashes in.
Sam and Bob, ornery as they were, putting us together in the back seat of a car, Laura on one side, me on the other. I still think the Lord had a hand in that, because as I met Laura and got to know her better, there was something told me there's no way, that I was going to let that gal get away.
But for the most part, we dated pretty much all through high school, with very small breaks during that time. And he would always sit behind me, and if I happened to be mad at him, he'd be poking me with a pencil, trying to get my attention. One time I got mad at him because he would leave notes for me in his locker, and he forgot and left some cigarettes. I absolutely blasted him because I thought, here you are playing basketball and you're smoking and you're not supposed to be doing that. And I think I broke up with him over that for a little while. Yeah. Well, and then you started playing for dances when you were, what, sophomore, junior?
No, junior. I was about a junior.
You started playing, and everyone went to the dances.
Yeah.
Everyone.
I have to tell you, though, my brother Howard got into a argument there with some guy who ended up being his brother-in-law. But what they had a practice of doing was going to the state line, which is just about a mile, up to the Wyoming state line. And there's a big area there. They'd put their headlights in there and go after it in fist fights. Yeah, Howard broke his wrist actually hitting this guy in the forehead, and he ended up being his brother-in-law, Tony Walsh. Really? Yeah, we played for years there at the Silver Glide Ballroom for West Rowan band, and I was pretty fortunate. I mean, I was able to make a little extra money then too with that. But after that was all over with, and I started my own band. I had a saxophone player from Torrington he was a big band player. I mean, he was an excellent saxophone player. I had an older fella that was named George. He played bass fiddle. He would ride that thing. He would entertain people. He was white-headed, but he could just really pick that thing. So we did that for several years too. We played in clubs. We played State Line, Oasis. To me, we thought we were having a lot of fun. I think my mother thought I had more talent than I did. But anyway, I had made a record for auditions. Lawrence Welk, and then there was a program going to be at the ranch just east of Cheyenne. They were going to have a television program there, and that was Arthur Godfrey, and I went and auditioned for that too. So that was my mother pushing that too.
How long were you engaged before you got married?
Till
so it was just
1st.
that little short period. Was that pretty common back then? To just be engaged for a little bit and then just get married?
And then my sister Marie said she would make me a velvet wedding gown if we would get married in the wintertime.
Huh.
So then we decided, well, we might as well get married.
Right.
It was a beautiful dress. Boy, she was a seamstress.
In those days, like my bridesmaids, you didn't go out and buy expensive dresses. They wore their prom dresses, or a formal.
Right.
But they weren't necessarily all alike. The same way with the guys. They wore a nice suit. We had cake and punch at the reception. It was very simple, but really, really nice.
What do you remember the most about that day?
That he had played for a dance the night before, and I was hoping we wouldn't be too sleepy.
Yeah. Right after the reception, of course, we were to head to Scottsbluff, and of course we switched cars too, didn't we? We took my dad's car.
Cans on the car.
He had a 1949 Dodge sedan, nice car, and I had a Ford at that time, and of course we knew it was going to get greased up and dirt, tin cans, the whole works. And so we switched and took my dad's, and we had Grandma Rob with us.
His grandma rode with
my
us
grandma.
back to Scottsbluff.
Well, she lived in Scottsbluff, so we
So she
took
just
her.
needed a lift.
We took her with us.
She went with
Here
us
was
to
all
the
the
movie.
tin cans behind that car, and guys, and now that's before the oiled road was to Lyman. It was dirt, gravel. So here we come down to Scottsbluff, and the dust is flying. There's several cars behind us because they chase you for a while. You know how it goes. And
No,
come into Scottsbluff, and we ended up. We had dinner with Grandma too, didn't we?
She
We
went
took
dinner
her
and a
to a
movie
show,
with Grandma.
and we took her to a movie, and then.
Where at the old Midwest?
I think it was the Bluffs, they called it, didn't
What?
they?
Same
the,
theater,
The
though, yeah.
theater that night.
Midwest.
Was it? Well, I don't
I
think
don't
it was.
know what they
It was
called
it was a prominent theater.
And then we
Scottsbluff.
stayed in Scottsbluff that night, and then we went to Denver the next morning.
Yeah, we stayed in the Lincoln Hotel, which is now the.
It was a nice hotel.
Well, it was a nice hotel then. But anyway, that was quite an evening that we had, first evening.
Then we got in Denver and got on a one-way street going the wrong
Yeah.
way. and
Yeah,
it was
we stayed the
stormy.
Shirley
Have you been to
Savoy.
Denver before?
Never, I'd never driven in Denver,
We hadn't been out of town.
And we did. We went down one-way street the wrong way a couple times. But anyway,
We
it
didn't
was.
stay long. What? Two,
No, we only
2
stayed
days.
2 or 3 days. Yeah.
Because by then your family said you got to get back.
Yeah.
We've got work to do. You need.
Yeah.
You didn't go on long trips.
Well, we didn't have a lot of money then either.
No, we didn't.
We just didn't.
Of course, going into the military, and it was really hard when he left. I remember how hard it was because I didn't know what he was going into. And I didn't know how soon we'd see him because for 3 months you can't have any contact with him at all. And then we went and visited and had to come back. And then when he got his station there the rest of the year, then we lived in San Diego for that long.
So, 2 years of getting married, and then you joined the military. What was the rationale for that? You just
Well, I
wanted
knew
to
that I
travel,
might
or-
get drafted.
They were drafting.
They were drafting right into the Marine Corps.
Right.
So I joined.
So this
And I
was
was
been,
glad.
what, like 51?
This was 1952 January 1st, 1952, or was it? Yeah, January.
In January.
In January.
Yeah.
And I was glad I did after I got in because, draftees, they treat a little differently in there than they did the enlistees. Yeah, in the Marine Corps.
He was dreading going to Camp Pendleton to rifle range. Even though he could shoot well and everything, he was thinking, boy, if I don't qualify, I'm going to have to do this and this. And he not only qualified, he won his platoon. So
Were you guys scared about that? Like, were you afraid you were going to see some combat, or?
Well, I don't think I was scared of it at that point. When I went in, it was getting down. In fact, I did have a friend of mine, a guy that went through field music school with me, who got killed the first day he was over there.
but you got in the drum and bugle team.
Yeah,
So
I got in
he-
the Fleet and Reinforced Drum and
it's a whole
Bugle team.
different-
So I was at a different classification then. So that kept a rifle out of my hand.
Yeah.
See. Oh gosh, we were in Kwajalein, we were Guam, Wake,
Japan.
Japan. We went from the southern Sasebo, Japan, all the way through the north.
Alaska.
And we did that first. But Japan, we played for orphanages, military bases that didn't have a band or anything. We'd go and do guard mounts. But we entertained most of the time. Before we went overseas, we actually played a program there in front of the MGM Theater, or studios in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And it was kind of fun, you know. We were on television, which was not very common then, you know.
His first year, I was able to be in San Diego, and
Yep.
Buzz's wife and I were both there. And I worked for City Chevrolet Company in the office. And he was able to live off base. And then when he went overseas, I moved back home with my parents, and that was kind of hard.
Yeah.
In a barracks, we stayed in Pearl Harbor. One of my best friends was a guy named Skippy Dyer, and he played football for them over there. He ended up going to University of Hawaii, played against Nebraska.
Oh, wow.
You remember that? And he was the neatest guy, but he was a good influence on me because we went to church together at that time, you know, when you go to the service. But he was the kind of guy that might have gotten shunned, you know, in certain areas nowadays because of his skin color. Sure. You know? But boy, we had in the service that wasn't a thing you did. It was you know, they're guys and men just like you. You know.
Sam made sure we went to evangelistic meetings every time they came around, but we weren't ready yet. We were still seeking and thinking, oh boy, I'm going to give up something. And we didn't give up anything. There has never been a time when we felt like turning away from that. We were, you know, we'd both gone to church all of our lives, but we didn't really have a personal relationship.
Sure.
Yeah, we didn't at that time.
What made that change?
I think maybe when my mom died, for one thing. She died in 57, and I was only 26 years old. And that had an impact on me. And then when we went back to Des Moines, we were stationed in, he was not in the military, he worked for United Airlines.
United Airlines, yeah.
And I remember one night when he was at working all night, I guess.
Yeah.
And I listened to Billy Graham, and I did everything that he said, prayed the prayer and everything, and then I thought, well, I don't feel any different, so nothing happened.
Right.
I was working at the airport in Scottsbluff for United, came home that night, and she was with Pastor Golds in our living room. I walk in the door and she's in tears, you know, and I went, what's going on, you know? And Pastor Golds talked to me. Of course, we heard the gospel.
Oh yes,
a number of times. Sure. I mean, there were no question. We'd heard the gospel. We knew the message. Anyway, and then of course he asked me if I'd wanted to accept Christ. You know, he gave me a passage of scripture and asked me to go to the bedroom, and that's what I did. I went and read that, and we both accepted the Lord the same night.
Did you ever think about not coming back to the Midwest? Did you think about going anywhere else, or
no?
You just always knew you were going to come back here.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and we did live in Des Moines for a year when he worked for United, but we didn't really like it. We were, and in fact, he was just transferred back here
to Scottsbluff
from there. So when he resigned from United, it wasn't that he couldn't have gone on, but he had a choice of, I think it was Los Angeles or Chicago or San Francisco.
We just did, you know,
we didn't want to raise a family.
We didn't want to go out there that badly, so we just resigned and
went to work on the farm.
Yeah.
Went back to farming.
Yeah. Do you ever think about if you would have?
Oh, he'd have been a great success.
There's times that, you know, I probably, you know, you think maybe I missed an opportunity, you know, but with United, because they were a good company.
They were a great company. You know, of course, to begin with, you don't want to have a family immediately, but after about a year, didn't really try, but we thought it'd be okay. And then we didn't have a family, and we didn't have a family, and so when we were married about 5 years, we began to talk about adoption because we'd been told by the doctors that we wouldn't have any children. We had tests done, and they said it didn't look very promising. And so we were married almost 6 years when we adopted Rod. And I was working at the doctor's office, and the one doctor, they all knew we wanted a baby. So the one doctor said he had a patient from eastern Nebraska that was going to have a baby and wanted to give it up for adoption. And so we were able to adopt that baby. And so Rod was 3 days old when we brought him home. And I still remember when they called and said he had been born, and I ran out to the field where Al was working. I said, we're going to have a little boy. And we were really excited. And so then we were married almost 9 years when Brad was born, and then 2 years later Lori, and about 3.5 years later Shelley, and then we quit worrying about it anymore.
My earliest memory would be, out on the farm. I was probably a year, 2 years, sitting in the high chair playing with my grandma Heinrich.
One of the first memories I have with my dad, I couldn't have been more than about 4 or 5 years old, or 3 or 4 years old, playing catch, throwing a baseball for me in the backyard. And I kept saying, "Higher, Daddy, higher."
Mom in the kitchen cooking supper, Dad out working. I can remember Grandma and I was sitting in my high chair. We had a stagecoach and horses, and she was running around my tray on my high chair.
And he'd throw it a little bit higher, and sure enough, he threw it pretty high, and I ran under it, and I missed it, and it hit me right in the eye. I got my first black eye.
For some reason, my memories stem around living out in Cornet Heights. Like when Dad would bring home like a motorcycle or something from where he worked at the car dealership, and just a simple life out there, really.
I think my earliest memory is our trip to California in the station wagon, and Mom waking us all up singing, what was that awful song?
I Will Greet the Day
I
with
Will Greet
Singing.
the Day with Singing.
I remember coming home one day after school, and there was this big, huge upright piano that had been delivered.
And she sings the whole thing and wakes us up.
That was awesome.
But they made us a bed in the back of the station wagon. I remember that. Thought it was the coolest thing ever. No seatbelts.
Just the sacrifices they made to let us enjoy some of those things.
Shoot, I didn't even know I was adopted till I was probably 4th, 5th grade, maybe 6th. You know, I didn't have a clue. Didn't really care. You know.
We were all special, you know, Rod and myself and the girls later on.
Everybody has always asked me, well, what about you real folks? You know, what I got to say about that is it was their loss, because I'm a great person.
I think what came with that were some expectations about how this multi-kid family was going to be, and that was a good thing. It pushed me and caused me to want to please Mom and Dad.
Well, Lori and I always got along, didn't we?
We did. We were different. You know, you
Right.
were into the sports and stuff and very talented in that area, and I didn't get those gifts. But
That's not true. She was fabulous at WNCC playing
oh my
college
word.
basketball.
You can edit that out.
You know, Rod was enough older, but I remember. I mean, I loved Rod. He was good to me, and
Yeah, he was funny. One time we rode on a bike together. I was on the back, he was on the front, and he closed his eyes and told me to tell him to turn right or left. And I was young enough, I wasn't too sure of those rights and lefts, and I told him the wrong way, and he ran into a parked vehicle, and
she's not that
got a
great.
little injury. So yeah.
You know, my brother was always, especially when I was little, was always the guy pushing the envelope for me.
What I do remember about Brad is the big eyes. He had huge eyes when he was a kid. I mean, he pretty much does now too, but.
So you try to emulate what he does. He's able and permitted to do some things that I wasn't supposed to do. So in that sense, Rod was kind of the trailblazer, and then I tried to widen the trail.
I remember back then his eyes covered his whole face. He looked like a cartoon almost.
And I looked up to Brad a lot.
Shelley and I got a bond early on, after she was just a baby, maybe 6 or 8 months old, I don't know.
He was a great big brother. Now, there was one moment.
And I sneezed in front of her, and she let out the biggest belly laugh I've ever heard from a baby of that age.
I locked myself in the bathroom.
She did do that.
One time because I don't even know, he was upset with me about something.
But I have really fond memories of being a very young boy, and my sisters, you know, sort of following the wake that my brother and I were creating. We were the mischievous ones. The girls were, you know, kind of incapable of getting in trouble unless we caused it.
And
Tell him what you wrote on the oven.
that was not this time.
She did. She wrote, "I hate Brad."
But I'd say Rod sort of set the pace, and then I took it from him. And between us, we cut a wide swath for the girls to go through, so it was easy for them to stay within the rails.
But then I remember in high school, the greatest honor was that he he invited me along on a double date with him, you know, his sister.
I didn't know that.
And I thought that was kind of cool.
Well, I always like to think I had a strong work ethic, you know, and I got that from knowing them. I mean, look at them today, they're still working.
There's nothing Dad won't try to fix, and usually he can.
Yeah.
Even as a boy, I understood that, you know, priority number one for my dad was to take care of his family.
The one thing I always admired Dad, and I don't care what anybody says about him, that man could sell a freezer to an Eskimo.
And so that meant leaving the farm and getting a job at Myers Lease Sales and Service. Great, he would do that, and he excelled at it.
He is not afraid to try anything, and he's such a people person. I learned so much from him just in watching him with. There's no strangers. He has there's no strangers to him.
There's one particular instance, and I won't get into the detail of it, but my brother, who was 18 at the time, had made a pretty significant choice and therefore consequences.
Watching her run around doing the housework and watching her cook, and you know, every once in a while one of us yell out there and go, "Do you need help?" You know, and of course the answer always is, "Nope, I've got it." You know.
She's explaining this to me, and my 15-year-old reaction was, "Mom, Dad, what are you gonna do?" And without missing much of a beat, my mom simply said, "We're just gonna love them through it."
You know, Mom has always just been a really good friend too to me. I mean, we laugh at the same stupid stuff, and I cannot tell you how many times it seems to be that when we're moving furniture in particular.
As a kid, I don't know. I don't think you could ask for anything better.
I think it was really easy to perceive that in their lives, their faith and their family came first. Everything else was secondary.
I don't actually ever remember my mom and dad raising their voice to me.
And so I'm not particularly proud of it. I feel like I inherited it. But I will be proud if, when my day comes, I preserved it.
They're both the type of people that if they see something that needs done or there's a need, they're going to make it happen.
As I got a little older, I understood that being authentic was more important than being pleasing or perfect.
I can remember I was driving a truck and bought a house over on Avenue H. Thanks to Mom and Dad with their help.
And looking back on it, I see that that's probably one of the bedrock values that my parents had. They were who they were. They were comfortable in their skin.
Obviously, have experienced things in their marriage we may not even know about, but you know, she said there just was it was just a commitment. There was no question.
You know, Mom and Dad were always there no matter what.
Oh, they are such a gift, and as grandparents, because where I fail, they pick it up.
One of the vivid memories I have, I don't talk about very much, but when I made the decision to leave, for a variety of reasons, but I made the decision to leave after having had my best semester there, made the dean's list, made the superintendent's list, and went through the laborious process of voluntarily leaving. Somebody had to come and pick me up and take me away from the academy grounds. And there I am in my civilian clothes, saying goodbye to my best friends, my brothers. We've been through all this stuff together. I held it together until I got in the car with my dad, who'd driven down from Scottsbluff to pick me up. And I don't think I've sobbed like that in my entire life. My dad was so accepting and loving and comforting, even though I know he was massively disappointed that he wasn't going to get to watch me graduate the way Howard got to watch Mike graduate. In the midst of his disappointment, all he did was love me through it. That strong hand of my dad and the love that he showed was protecting and comforting and upholding. He probably doesn't remember those things, but I will never ever forget them. And I always want to try to model that. Okay.
I mean, it's just a huge thank you. I mean, thank you for the blessing you've been in our lives. Thank you for the way you've led our family. Thank you for your example. And I know we've said all that stuff, but it's just so real to me. Like Lori said, that framed how our lives have gone, and not that all of it's been great, but I always have that to return to. And I'm just want to say thank you.
I guess Mom and Dad, I think of just the example of how genuine you are, how real you are, how dependable you are. Our kids, my grandkids, we know that we can come to you anytime with anything, and the wisdom we get from you is so valuable. And I just think of the blessing of growing up in a home that we did. You know, when you see what's around us in this world today, you know, I don't take that for granted, and I just appreciate so much the commitment to making our family as solid and loved, feeling loved, you know, every day. I know, like I said, things weren't, we don't mean to paint it that it was just perfect all the time, but I am so very grateful, so very thankful.
Mom, Dad, the 70 plus years of love that you've shared with one another are like the roots of a tree that have grown deeper and deeper for all of those years, yielding a gigantic trunk and lots of branches, of which I'm one. And my children are yet another set of branches. I can't begin to tell you how important it has been that the foundation you represent is based on faith and family first. The love that you've shown, loving us through it, the way in which you embrace us even when we're wrong, and the certainty that you've given all of us that we'll be together forever can't be measured, can't be articulated with mere words. But you need to know how deeply we all love and respect and admire you, and how happy we are that we're here to celebrate with you on your 70th anniversary. I love you.
Probably the easiest thing to say is, I know I've kind of always been the black sheep. And, you know, through the hard times and the good times, especially the hard times, Mom and Dad have always been there. And I love them for it. Thanks, Mom and Dad. I love you.
I'm fascinated by the playfulness, the insight, the depth of their codependence voluntarily. I'm a little annoyed by the fact they spend a little too much time, or at least my mom does, spending a little too much time planning for it and worrying that it won't be a problem, it won't be a bother. Of course it's going to be a bother, Mom. You know?
I do have an unusual opportunity to be able to see them at this stage in their life, since they live in my home, and we kind of support each other through that, but half the time I can be out of the room, but I can still hear them communicating, and it's adorable.
But I think knowing that they are as prepared as they are in their faith, in their spirituality, I think they look forward to it in the sense that they're not anxious for it to happen, but they're not afraid of it either. There is no fear.
To view the days ahead, not in fear, but in a way of looking forward to it.
I think at this stage of life, death becomes a reality. You know, I think we all think we're going to live forever. And then the time comes when we know we're not, and our bodies tell us that.
Having a strong partner like Laura, and we both know, hey, there's going to be a day. The one of us isn't going to be here, or both of us. And we have to meet day to day the way the Lord planned it. You know, you do what He has planned for your life.
When I had this mini stroke earlier, I remember thinking that night, okay, that blood vessel was blocked. What's going to happen with that blood? Am I going to have a major stroke? And honestly, that night I had such peace. It was amazing, and only God could give me that. I was resting in that bed in ER, and Shelley offered to spend the night with me. And she was laying on this really hard bed, and I think we talked most of the night. But I'm not afraid. I, of course, don't want to suffer. No one does, but that's not up to me.
You always, I think, in life want your memory to be honesty, loyalty, and a spiritual guide, if you could be.
But it does definitely become more real, and you think about it a lot more, and maybe you treasure the days you have more.
If you could say one thing that you hope that kind of carries with everyone that you've interacted with in your long life, what would that be at this point in your life?
I think probably keep the pace.
I'm not ready to leave yet because there's a lot of things I want to see yet.
I would just go to my grave feeling wonderful if I knew that the world was not invading my family.
We have so much to be thankful for. I adore all my grandkids and my children, and I can't talk anymore.
When I say my family, I mean the entire family really grew in the Lord. I mean, that would be wonderful, you know, active and not ashamed of Jesus Christ. That's what I would look for.
I guess I'd like a few more years with them.
So talking kind of more about, 70 years obviously is a milestone that not a lot of marriages make it to. A lot of them don't make it 5. And it's a very incredible thing that we're very proud of. And I guess talk a little bit about what that means to you guys. What's 70 years? Is it you're going to wake up on January 1st and feel any different, or?
No, I think I'll feel the same, but it's been a joyous ride, What I said earlier, I think the impact of that is not probably going to come to us beyond that date maybe, but it is, it doesn't seem like it's been that long, you know what I mean? It just can't hardly comprehend that. But I wouldn't have changed a thing, Nate. I really wouldn't have for this.
And each season of life, as I mentioned earlier, is different. There's the time when it's just the two of you, and then it's your children are small, and then your children are growing up, and your children are gone, and each one is a different season, and there's struggles in every one because you learn to adapt to each one. But as you grow older, I think you become less selfish. And as you, even younger, as you mature, you think, okay, I'm not going to make a big deal of who's taking the trash out, and I'm not going to make a big deal of some stupid thing. I think if you can always put that other person first and be a servant and be glad that you can do that, and not do it with resentment, but do it because you want to, that's probably the biggest thing that you can do in a marriage. You can't be selfish.
So true. You just, I think that the word servant is a good word as far as when you're going to be together, why wouldn't you serve each other? And it's an easier relationship when you know that the truth and trust is there.
Well, and we do that a lot. And like I've said, Al does things for me that other husbands don't do. And I try to do things for him. Someone will say, well, why are you waiting on him like that? Well, you do it because you want to, or he cleans house because he wants to. It's not anything you do out of obligation. You do it because you want to.
There's something good about a relationship when your partner can say, no, I don't think that's true, or that's maybe not right. She's always been able to do that in a loving way.
But all of marriage, every different aspect of it, you work at it and you work through it, and your love grows stronger, I think, as a result of that.
And I've always felt that she was one who kept me on the straight. And particularly since we come to know the Lord, she's been a spiritual giant to me. I don't tell her that enough.
I think it really boils down to, do you want what's best for the other person, or do you want your own way? My dearest Al, I think this is the first letter I've written. Actually, I printed it so I could read it to you since 1953, when you were overseas with the Marine Drum and Bugle Corps. Both of us wrote lots of letters that year. I hope you know how much I love you. I'm just getting started.
Take as long as you need, Grandma. No worries.
You are my friend, my rock, my protector, and my defender.
My dearest Laura, I can truly say that as I write this letter, my love for you as my best friend.
Shape up. You are always there for me, and you are the strong one when times have been hard.
Love of my life is ever stronger.
Always telling me it will get better, and it does. I remember and am so thankful for the times when we were raising our family. How you would come home from work, and knowing that I needed a break.
When we first met, I imagined what it would be like to have you share your life with me.
You would tell me that you would watch the kids so I could take a nice long bubble bath. Sometimes you even ran my bath water. How many husbands do that? In later years, and even now, I'll come home from work and you've cleaned the whole house. What an example of being the servant that is to me and to our family.
I have been so blessed to spend our lives together, to raise our children, and to live for Jesus together, and to now face this time before we go to be with the King of the universe.
Our kids have always known, too, that their dad is always available for any task.
Your strength in the Lord has sustained me beyond measure.
You've always been the strong, quiet, thoughtful one, while I'm the one who's in a hurry to get things done. I guess we balance each other out, at least I hope so. There are different seasons of life, and each one has its mountains and valleys, and we've seen lots of those. Our love for each other and for our family has survived those times and grown stronger through them.
Your constant support, you'll never know how much you've influenced me for good, sweetheart.
I can't imagine life without you. You've been the best husband, father, and grandpa.
God really knew I needed someone like you to help our family through some storms of turmoil.
I'm not one bit sorry I got to marry that tall, handsome, brown-eyed guy that I fell in love with. When I was just a teenager, I looked forward to spending the rest of my life with you, and then eternity.
We've been truly blessed to have a family that we're so proud of, and because of your being the kind of mother that brought Jesus into the lives of our children early on, they now know Jesus.
because we know we can have our hope of heaven because of Jesus' death and resurrection. Because we put our trust in him back in March of '58. That was no doubt the most important decision we made in our entire life as a couple. Just want you to know I love you with all my heart. Always have, always will.
I can say I'm the most blessed man in the world to have such a jewel of a wife that has loved me unconditionally.
Your Laura.
And I will eternally be thankful to the Lord for his giving you to me for this lifetime.
You did good.
I did terrible.
I love you, sweetheart, forever.
Well, I'm colder than batshit right now.
Well, it is chilly, but it's not bad. I mean,
Oh, maybe it'll warm up a little bit.
I think it will.
Check something real quick. Look real quick. A teaspoon.
What was it called?
Kartoffel and glaze soup.
Ready?
It caught on fire.
That away. Softball. That is. Whoa! That a boy. You ready?
When we graduated from high school and he left home, I was really angry with him because I felt like he was being spoiled and not helping his family, and his mother was heartbroken, and I was really close to his mom, and so I was pretty mad at him, and so he dated others that summer, and I did too, and it was hard because we still cared about each other.
And like you say, there were times, when maybe we thought we'd maybe go a different direction, but we always came back to each other.
Then, especially when we had to see each other, because he was helping out with this softball team from Scottsbluff, and I was playing with the one from Lyman, and so we weren't speaking to each other, and that made it kind of hard.
I just could see something in her personality, and I could see how she cared for people. I don't know whether you'd call her, she was extrovert in some ways and introvert in other ways, but what a beautiful person she was.
And then as I said, the one night, and I had a date that night.
And boy, you knew that instantly when I met her down there at the Kiowa school,
And he asked me for the last dance. And by the way, our favorite song was Stardust. We always danced the last dance to Stardust. I don't know why, we liked the music.
It's funny how that turned out, but I had a feeling that this thing was going to go a long ways, and it sure has.